Sister Mary. We are continuing in 2 Kings chapter 5 through chapter 10. I am reading out of the Interlinear Bible, which is the Hebrew and the Aramaic translation of the Old Testament. So I want to thank you for joining me for today in seeking God and His holy word, and we will continue. Hello? Amen. 2 Kings of chapter 5. And Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Syria, was great and exalted man before his Lord, for Jehovah had given deliverance to Syria by him. And he was a brave warrior, but leprous, and the Syrians had gone out in bands, and they seized from the land of Israel a little girl, and she was before Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, "Oh, that my Lord were before the prophet, who is in Samaria. Then he would receive or recover him from his leprosy." And one went in and told his Lord, saying, "This and this," she said, "the girl who is from the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, Go in, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. And he went and took in his hand 10 talents of silver and 6,000 of gold, and 10 charges of 10 changes of garments. And he came to the king of Israel with a letter, saying, "And now when this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent to you my servant Naaman, and you shall recover him from his leprosy." And it happened when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his garments and said, "Am I God to kill and to keep alive? That is, one is sending to me to recover a man from his leprosy. For consider now and see, for he is coiling himself toward me." And it happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard the king of Israel had torn his garments, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your garments? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." And Naaman came with the horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, and you shall wash 7 times in the Jordan. Your flesh shall return to you, and you shall be clean." And Naaman was angry, and went on and said, "Behold, I said, he will certainly come out to me, and I will stand and call on the name of Jehovah his God, and will wave his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abna and Pharpah, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Shall I not wash in them and be clean?" And he turned and went on in fury. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had spoken a great thing to you, would you not do it? How much rather then, when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" And he went down and dipped in the Jordan 7 times, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh returned like the flesh of a little boy, and he was clean. And he went back to the man of God, he and all his company, and came in and stood before him, and said, "Behold, now I know that there is not a God in all the earth except in Israel. And now please take a blessing from your servant." And he said, "As Jehovah lives, before whom I stand, I shall not take." And he pressed on him to take, but he refused. And Naaman said, "If not, please let a couple of mules burden of earth be given to your servant. For your servant shall not make any more burnt offering and sacrifice to other gods, only to Jehovah. May Jehovah pardon your servant for this thing. When my Lord goes to the house of Rimmon to bow there, and he is supported by my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, may Jehovah pardon your servant in his thing." And he said to him, "Go in peace." And he went away a little way from him. And Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "Behold, my Lord has spared the Syrian Naaman, not to receive from his hand that which he has bought. And as Jehovah lives, surely I will run after him, then I shall take something from him." And Gehazi ran after Naaman, and Naaman saw one running after him, and got down from the chariots to meet him, and said, Is there peace? And he said, Peace, my Lord, has sent me, saying, Behold, this now 2 young men from the hills of Ephraim have come to me, of the sons of the prophets. Please give to them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. And Naaman said, Be pleased, take 2 talents. And he urged on him, and bound 2 talents of silver, and 2 purses, and 2 changes of garments, and gave to 2 of his young men, and they carried before him. And he came into the hill, and took out of their hand, and put away in the house, and sent away the men. And they went, and he went in, and stood by his Lord. And Elisha said to him, Where from? Gehazi. And he said, Your servant did not go here or there. And he said to him, Did not my heart go out when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to take silver, and to take garments, and olives, and vineyards, and flock, and herds, and male slaves, and slave girls? Yea, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you, and to your seed forever. And he went out from him as leprous as snow. Chapter 6 of 2 Kings. And the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, See now, the place where we are living with you is too narrow for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and we shall take each one a beam from there, and we shall make for ourselves a place there to live there. And he said, Go. And the one said, Please be willing, and go with your servants. And he said, I will surely go. And he went with them. And they came to the Jordan, and cut down trees. And it happened that one was felling the log, and the iron fell into the water. And he cried out and said, Alas, my Lord, for it was asked. And the man of God said, Where did it fall? And he showed him the place. And he cut a stick and threw it in there, and caused the iron to float. And he said, Take it up to you. And he put out his hand and took it. And the king of Syria was fighting against Israel, and took counsel with his servants, saying, At such and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, Be on guard in passing by this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. And the king of Israel sent to the place of which the man of God spoke to him, and warned him. And he protected himself there, not once nor twice. And the heart of the king of Syria was enraged over this thing. And he called his servants, and said to them, Will you not tell me who of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, No, my Lord, O king, for Elijah the prophet who is in Israel tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your sleeping room. And he said, Go and see where he is, and I will send and seize him. And it was told him, Behold, he is in Dothan. And he sent horses and chariots there, and a heavy army. And they came in by night, and surrounded the city. And the servant of the man of God rose up early, and went out. And behold, an army was surrounding the city, and horses and chariots. And his young man said to him, Alas, my Lord, what shall we do? And he said, Do not fear, for those with us are more than those with them. And Elisha prayed and said, I beg you, O Jehovah, open his eyes so that he may see. And Jehovah opened the eyes of the young man, and he looked, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And they came down to it, and Elisha prayed to Jehovah, and said, I beg you, strike this nation with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, This is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you seek. And he led them to Samaria. And it happened when they came to Samaria, Elisha said, Open the eyes of these, O Jehovah, and they will see. And Jehovah opened their eyes, and they looked. And behold, they were in the middle of Samaria. And when he saw them, the king of Israel said to Elisha, Shall I strike? Shall I strike, my father? And he said, You shall not strike. Would you strike those whom you have captured with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. And he prepared a great banquet for them, and they ate and drank. And he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the companies of Syria did not come into the land of Israel any more. And afterwards it happened that Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria gathered all his army and went up and laid siege to Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they were laying siege to it until the head of an ass was at 80 silver pieces, and a fourth of a cab of doves during at 5 silver pieces. And it happened that the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, and a woman cried to him, saying, Save my lord, O king. And he said, If Jehovah does not save you, from where shall I save you? Out of the threshing floor, or out of the wine vat? And the king said to her, What ails you? And she said, This woman said to me, Give your son, and we will eat him today, and tomorrow we will eat my son. And we boiled my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, Give your son, and we will eat him. But she hid her son. And it happened when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his garments. He was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, the sackcloth was inside on his flesh. And he said, So may God do to me, and more also, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall remain on him today. And Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. And the king sent a man from before him. Before the messenger came to him, even he himself said to the elders, Do you see that this son of the murderer has sent to take away my head? Behold, when the messenger comes in, shut the door, and you shall hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of the feast of his Lord behind him? While he was speaking with them, then behold, the messenger came down to him, and he said, Behold, this is the evil from Jehovah. Why should I wait for Jehovah any more? Chapter 7 of 2 Kings. And Elisha said, Hear the word of Jehovah. So says Jehovah, About this time tomorrow a measure of fine flour will be at a shekel, and 2 measures of barley at a shekel in the gate of Samaria. And the third officer on whose hand the king leaned replied to the man of God, and said, Behold, if Jehovah would make widows in the heavens, this thing might be. And he said, Behold, you shall see with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. And 4 men, lepers, were at the gate entrance. And they said to one another, Why should we sit here until we die? If we say, We shall go into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. If we sit here, then we shall die. Therefore now, come, and we will fall into the camp of Syria. If they keep us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, then we die. And they rose up in the twilight to go to the Syrian camp. And they came to the edge of the Syrian camp. And behold, there was not a man there, for the Lord had caused the Samaritan army to hear a sound of chariots, and a sound of horses, and a sound of a great army. And they said to one another, Behold, the king of Israel has hired the kings of the Hittites against us, and the kings of Egypt to come against us. And they rose up and fled in the twilight, and left their tents, and their horses, and their asses, the camp as it was. And they fled for their life. And these lepers came to the edge of the camp, and came into one tent, and ate and drank, and took up from there silver and gold and garments, and went and hid them. And they returned and went into another tent, and took from there, and went and hid them. And they said to one another, We are not doing right this day. It is a day of good news, and we are keeping silent. And if we wait until the morning light, then punishment will find us. Therefore now, come, and we will go and tell the house of the king. And they came in and called to the gatekeeper of the city, and spoke for themselves, saying, We have come to the camp of Syria. And behold, there is not a man there, nor voice of man, but horses tied, and asses tied, and the tents as they were. And he called the gatekeepers, and they told the house of the king inside. And the king rose up by night, and said to his servants, Let me show you now that which the Syrians have done to us. They know that we are famished. They have gone out from the camp to hide in the field, saying, When they come out of the city, then we will catch them alive, and we shall come into the city. And one of his servants answered and said, Let them take now 5 of the horses that remain, which are left in the city. Behold, they are as all the multitude of Israel who have been left in it. Behold, they are as all the multitude of Israel who have perished. And we will send and see. And they took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent after the Syrian army, saying, Go and see. And they went after them to the Jordan, and behold, all the way was full of garments and vessels that the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. And the messengers returned and told the king. And the people went out and plundered the Syrian camp. And it happened, a measure of fine flour sold at a shekel, and 2 measures of barley at a shekel, according to the word of Jehovah. And the king appointed the 3rd officer over the gate, he on whose hand he leaned. And the people trod him down in the gate, and he died, as the man of God spoke, which he spoke when the king came down to him. And it happened according to the saying of the man of God to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley at a shekel, and a measure of fine flour at a shekel. This shall be at this time tomorrow in the gate of Samaria. And the 3rd officer had answered the man of God, and said, Behold, if Jehovah should make widows in the heavens, it shall be according to this word. And he said, Behold, you shall see with your eyes, but you shall not eat from there. And it happened to him in this way. Yea, the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. 2 Kings chapter 8. And Elisha spoke to the woman, whose son he had revived, saying, Rise up and go, you and your household, and stay where you can stay, for Jehovah has called for a famine. And also it shall come on the land 7 years. And the woman rose up and did according to the word of the man of God. And she and her household went and stayed in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And it happened at the end of 7 years that the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and went to cry to the king for her house and for her field. And the king was speaking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Please tell me all the great things that Elisha has done. And it happened as he was telling the king how he had revived the dead. Then behold, the woman whose son he had revived was crying to the king for her house and for her field. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elijah revived. And the king asked the woman, and she told him. And the king appointed to her a certain eunuch, saying, Give back all that she has, and all the increase of the field from the day she left the land until now. And Elisha came to Damascus, and Benhadad, the king of Syria, was sick. And he was told, saying, The man of God has come here. And the king said to Hazael, Take a present in your hand, and go to meet the man of God, and you shall seek Jehovah by him, saying, Shall I revive from this sickness? And Hazael went to meet him, and took a present in his hand, even of every good thing from Damascus, a burden of 40 camels. And he came in and stood before him, and said, Your son Benhadad, the king of Syria, has sent me to you, saying, Shall I revive from this sickness? And Elijah said to him, Go say to him, You shall surely revive. But Jehovah has shown me that he will surely die. And he fixed his face, yea, he settled it until he was ashamed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, Why is my Lord weeping? And he said, Because I know the evil that you will do to the sons of Israel. You will send their fortified places into fire, and you will slay their young men with the sword, and you will dash their sucklings to pieces, and you will rip up their pregnant women. And Hazael said, But what? Is your servant a dog that he should do this great thing? And Elisha said, Jehovah has shown me that you will be king over Syria. And he left Elisha and came to his Lord. And he said to him, What did Elisha say to you? And he said, He said to me, You shall surely recover. And it happened on the next day, he took a plaited cloth, and dipped it in water, and spread it on his face, and he died. And Hazael reigned in his place. And in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, and Jehoshaphat was king of Judah. Joram, the son of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, reigned. And he was 32 years old when he begot began his reign, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel and the house of Ahab, as the house of Ahab did. For a daughter of Ahab was his wife. And he did that which was evil in the eyes of Jehovah. And Jehovah was not willing to destroy Judah, for his servant David's sake, as he had said, to give him a lamp to his sons forever. In his days Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah, and they caused a king to reign over them. And Joram passed over to Zer, and all the chariots with him. And it happened he rose up by the night and struck Edom, who had encircled him, and the commanders of the chariots. And the people fled to their tents. Yet Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah to this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. And the rest of the acts of Joram, and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the matters of the days of the kings of Judah? And Jehoram lay with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Joram, the king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was a son of 22 years when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, the king of Israel. And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab, and did that which was evil in the eyes of Jehovah, like the house of Ahab, for he was the son-in-law of the house of Ahab. And he went with Jehoram, the son of Ahab, to battle with Hazael, the king of Syria, in Ramoth-Gilead. And the Syrian struck Jehoram, and Jehoram the king returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds with which the Syrians had struck him in Ramah, as he fought with Hazael, the king of Syria, and Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, the king of Judah, had gone down to see Jehoram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, for he was sick. Chapter 9 of 2 Kings. And Elisha the prophet called to one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, Gird up your loins, and take this vial of oil in your hand, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. And you shall go there, and you shall see there Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. And you shall go in and cause him to rise up out from among his brothers. And you shall bring him to an inner room, and take the vial of oil, and pour on his head, and say, So says Jehovah, I have anointed you as king to Israel. And you shall open the door and flee. And you shall not... Hold on. And you shall... The word's missing. You shall not wait. The young man went, the prophet's servant, to Ramoth-Gilead, and he came in, and behold, the army commanders were sitting. And he said, I have a word to you, O commander. And Jehu said, To which of all of us? And he said, To you, O commander. And he rose up and came into the house and poured the oil on his head. And he said to him, So says Jehovah, the God of Israel, I have anointed you as king to the people of Jehovah, to Israel. And you shall strike the house of your lord Ahab, that I may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of Jehovah from the hand of Jezebel. And all of the house of Ahab shall perish. Yea, I have cut off to Ahab those who urinate against the wall, both bound and free in Israel. And I have given up the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door and fled. And Jehu went out to the servants of his lord. And one said to him, Is there peace? Why did this madman come to you? And he said to them, You know the man and his message. And they said, A lie. Tell us now. And he said, this and this, he said to me, saying, So says Jehovah, I have anointed you king over Israel. And they hurried, and each man took his garment and put it under him on the bare steps, and blew the ram's horn, and said, Jehu reigns. And Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. And Joram was keeping watch at Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel, before Hazael the king of Syria. And the king Jeroam returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds with which the Syrians had smitten him as he fought with Hazael the king of Syria. And Jehu said, If it is in your mind, do not let one leave the city to go to tell it in Jezreel. And Jehu rode and went to Jezreel, for Jehoram lay there, and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, had gone down to see Jehoram. And the watchman was standing on the tower in Jezreel, and he saw the troop of Jehu as he came. And he said, I see a troop. And Jehoram said, Take a rider and send to meet them, and let him say, Is it peace? And the rider on the horse went to meet him, and said, So says the king, Is it peace? And Jehu said, What have you to do with peace? Turn behind me. And the watchman spoke, saying, The messenger came to them, and he has not returned. And he sent a second rider on a horse, and he came to them, and said, So says the king, Is it peace? And Jehu said, What have you to do with peace? Turn behind me. And the watchman spoke, saying, He came to them, and he had not returned. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu the son of Nimshi, for he drives madly. And Jehoram said, Harness up. And his chariot was harnessed. And Jehoram the king of Israel went out, and Ahaziah the king of Judah, each in his chariot. And they went out to meet Jehu, and found him in the portion of Naboth the Jezreelite. And it happened when Jehoram saw Jehu, he said, Is there peace, Jehu? And he said, What peace? So long as the sorceries of your mother, whoredoms of your mother, Jezebel, and her sorceries are so many. And Jehoram turned his hands and fled, and said to Ahaziah, Treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu filled his hand with a bow, and struck Jehoram between his arms. And the arrow went out from his heart, and he sank down in his chariot. And Jehu said to the third officer, Bidkar, Take up, throw him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember, you and I were riding together after his father Ahab. And Jehovah laid this burden on him. Surely yesterday I have seen the blood of Naboth, and the blood of his sons, says Jehovah. And I will repay you in this portion, says Jehovah. Now then, take him up, throw him into the portion according to the word of Jehovah. And Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw and fled the way of the garden house. And Jehu pursued him, and said, Strike him also in the chariot, in the ascent to Gur, that is Ilblim. And he fled to Megiddo and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem, and buried him in his burying place, with his fathers in the city of David. And in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, Ahaziah reigned over Judah. And Jehu came to Jezreel. And Jezebel had heard, and had painted her eyes, and adorned her head, and looked down through the window. And Jehu came to the gate. And she said, Was it peace to Zimri, the slayer of his lord? And he lifted his face to the widow, and said, Who is with me? Who? And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down to him. And he said, Throw her down. And they threw her down. And some of her blood was splashed on the wall and on the horses. And he trampled her, And he came in and ate and drank, and said, Now look after this cursed woman, and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. And they went to bury her, but did not find any of her, except the skull, and the feet, and the palms of the hands. And they came back and told him, and he said, It is the word of Jehovah, that he spoke by the hand of his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the portion of Jezreel the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, This is Jezebel. 2 Kings chapter 10. And Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. And Jehu wrote letters and sent to Samaria to the rulers of Jezreel, the elders, and to the supporters of Ahab, saying, And now when this letter comes to you, and you have with you the sons of your Lord, and chariots and horses are with you, and a fortified city, and armor, and you shall look out the best and the most upright of the sons of your Lord, and you shall set him on the throne of his father, and you shall fight for the house of your Lord. And they were greatly afraid, and said, Behold, the 2 kings have not stood before him, and how shall we stand? And he who was over the house, and he who was over the city, and the elders, and the supporters, sent to Jehu, saying, We are your servants, and all that you say to us we will do. We will not make anyone king. Do what is good in your eyes. And he wrote a letter to them a second time, saying, If you are for me, and are listening to my voice, take heads of the men, the sons of your Lord, and come to me about this time tomorrow to Jezreel. And the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the great men of the city who reared them. And it happened, when the letter came to them, they took the sons of the king and killed them, 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets, and sent to him in Jezreel. And the messenger came and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, Make them 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until the morning. And it happened in the morning, he went out and stood, and said to all the people, You are righteous. Behold, I have conspired against my Lord, and have killed him. But who struck all these? Now know that nothing of the word of Jehovah shall fall to the earth, that which Jehovah spoke against the house of Ahab, for Jehovah has done that which he spoke by the hand of his servant Elijah. And Jehu killed all those left to the house of Ahab in Jezreel, and his great men, and his friends, and his priests, until he did not leave a survivor to him. And he rose up and came in and went to Samaria. He was at the shepherd's shearing house in the way. And Jehu met the brothers of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, and said, Who are you? And they said, We are brothers of Ahaziah, and we are going down to ask the welfare of the sons of the king and the sons of the queen. And he said, Capture them alive. And they captured them alive and killed them at the pit of the shearing house, 42 men. And he did not leave a man of them. And he left there and found Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, and blessed him. And he said to him, Is your heart right, as my heart is with your heart? And Jehonadab said, It is. If it is, give your hand. And he gave his hand, and he made him come up to him into the chariot. And he said, Come with me and see my zeal for Jehovah. And they made him ride in his chariot. And he came to Samaria, and killed all those left of Ahab in Samaria, until he had destroyed him, according to the word of Jehovah that he spoke to Elijah. And Jehu gathered all the people, and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, Jehu shall serve him much. And now call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants, and all his priests. Do not let a man be lacking, for I shall have a great sacrifice to Baal. Anyone who is lacking, he shall not live. And Jehu was acting with cunning in order to destroy the servants of Baal. And Jehu said, Consecrate an assembly for Baal. And they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent to all Israel, and all the servants of Baal came in. And there was not a man left who did not come in. And they came into the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was full from mouth to mouth. And he said to him who was over the wardrobe, Bring out the garments to all the servants of Baal. And he brought out the garments to them. And Jehu and Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, went into the house of Baal, and said to the servants of Baal, Search and see that there are none of the servants of Jehovah here with you, but only the servants of Baal. And they came in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. And Jehu had set for himself 80 men on the outside. And he said, The man who lets any of the men escape, whom I am bringing into your hands, his life for the life of him. And it happened when he finished offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the runners and the third officers, Go in, strike them. Do not let any man come out. And they struck them by the edge of the sword. And the runners and the third officers threw them out. And they went into the city to the house of Baal, and brought out the pillars of the house of Baal, and burned them. And they broke down the pillar of Baal, and broke down the house of Baal, and made it an outhouse to this day. And Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel, only from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. Jehu did not turn from following them, the calves of gold that were at Bethel and in Dan. And Jehovah said to Jehu, Because you have done well to do that which is right in my eyes, and you have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, the sons of the fourth generation shall sit for you on the throne of Israel. And Jehu did not take heed to walk in the law of Jehovah, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, who caused Israel to sin. In those days Jehovah began to cut off in Israel, and Hazael struck them in all the border of Israel, from the Jordan eastward, the whole land of Gilead, of the Gadites, and the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aor by the Ammon River, even Gilead and Bashan. And the rest of the acts of Jehu, and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of the matter of the days of the kings of Israel? And Jehu lay with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And his son Jehoahaz reigned in his place. And the days that Jehu reigned over Israel were 28 years in Samaria.